Today we're going to talk about a technique that is used in social science in general, and we're going to apply it to advertising. Now, that tool or technique is called content analysis, and it's a technique that started at the beginning of the 20th century, mostly initialized by people that were studying communication in the journalistic field. Okay, originally started with the study of propaganda, right? But we're not going to use it in that context. That's just what the roots of the techniques are. Now, what is content analysis? Content analysis is basically a technique that is used to infer the meaning by studying systematically a message and breaking it down into its components, essentially. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a message, any message. In our case, is going to be a commercial of some sort. It could be a commercial that is in a billboard. It could be a commercial that is in a magazine. It could be a commercial that you could watch on YouTube or on TV, right? Or it could be a commercial that it's on Twitter, right? I don't care. It's just a message that is directed to a certain audience. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to understand what are the concepts that underlie that message. Now, what can be content analysis used for? Well, there are many uses for content analysis, but some of the key ones are basically try to understand what the motivations and intentions are of the sender of a message, right? In this case, it will be of a company, right? It could also be to try to understand what are the attitudes and behavioral responses that can be expected from a certain communication, right? So what is the sender thinking and what is their main position when it comes down to certain issues? So in this case, we are going to apply this kind of content also to advertising, right? Also to try to understand what is the psychological or emotional state of a person or of the message, right? This is something that it's used a lot, especially when you're reading or looking at something like reviews online, right? What is the emotional state of the person, right? What are they trying to convey with the review in terms of emotion? Are they really disgusted with the product, right? Or are they super excited, right? So that's something that you can actually ascertain by using content analysis, for example, on reviews online, which is something very popular right now. Okay. And there are other uses that you can give to the technique, but essentially is to try to really understand what is the underlying constituents of the message from any type of message, really. It could be from a video, which is something that you guys can do. It could be from text, which is the traditional original format, but it really doesn't matter, and it's breaking it down into its parts. Now, typically people will talk about two different types of content analysis. One is called conceptual analysis and the other one is called relational analysis. In this presentation, I'm only going to talk about conceptual analysis because that's all we are going to do in class. But if you're interested in understanding how different concepts relate to each other, then you will be doing relational analysis. But that's not going to be the focus of our story, right? And what conceptual analysis is basically breaking down a message into its different themes or topics in a way that if you were to measure those themes or topics multiple times, it will be reliable and hopefully valid. That means that you're actually measuring the topics or themes that you're actually defining, right? That will be validity. And reliability means that if you do it over and over again, you get similar results. So we're going to come up with a process that enables us to basically try to understand what are the topics, themes, or concepts that are underlying a certain message. And that's what we're going to do in the next few slides. So the critical aspect of conceptual analysis is to define the concepts or themes or topics that are within a message. So essentially what you're going to do in this technique is break down a larger set either of text or video, or it could be an image, and try to, based on your understanding of these topics, see whether they are included there or not. So what you're going to essentially be doing is going to be reducing or breaking down the message into smaller units and see whether those topics that you have defined a priori are actually present or not within those units, and then add it all up to see what is the prevailing topic within the message, and so on and so forth, right? And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use coders. So these are individual people like you or me who are going to read through the message, or they're going to watch through the video, or they're going to look at the image, and based on the definition that we're going to give them at the beginning of the topics or themes that we are discussing, they're going to make a call as to whether in that particular image, in that particular scene of a video, or in that particular text, that topic is actually present or not. And if it does show, they're going to just check, and if it doesn't, they're going to just provide a 0. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be basically making a judgment call as to whether those topics are actually present within the message or not. Now, what is the process that we're going to use to conduct a content analysis? We're going to start by selecting a sample of the content, right? So in our case, we're going to be doing advertising. Of course, I'm not expecting you guys to do all the advertising that a given brand has done. That's probably thousands of commercials, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to select a sample of content, and there are different ways to do this. You can do it randomly. I don't expect you guys to do any random selection for this, or you can use a simple convenient sample, which is just something that is available to you, which is what I expect you guys to do in this case. And I'm going to set up the sample size that you need to use for the exercise later. But the idea of selecting a sample is so that you can limit the amount of work that you need to do, but you still can make some sort of inference about what's happening in general, in our case with a brand, but in general with whatever that message sender is related to, right? So in our case, it will be a firm or a brand, okay? Then after you have selected the sample that you're going to be analyzing or studying, what you need to do is you need to create a coding scheme, also known as a codebook, right? And what that's going to have is going to have the themes, topic, or concepts that you're interested in studying, okay? And for that, what you need is you need a clear definition for each of them. And then what you need to do is you need to make sure that everybody that is going to be coding the messages, and usually it's more than one person, at least two, so that you can check whether actually you're doing a good job or not. Make sure that everybody that is going to be doing coding is well aware of these definitions, and you provide clear instructions about how you're going to be coding and what is included in each of the different topics. If you don't have clear suggestions about what is each of the different themes, what's going to happen is people are going to have different criteria internally to make those calls about what's present and not, and the reliability between the coders is going to be poor. Now, one thing that might happen also as you're doing the coding is that you might find new categories or topics that are relevant that you have not included. Okay, and if that's the case, you should come up with a definition for those new categories, and then you should recode the parts that have not been coded with those new topics to make sure that you didn't miss something and they were already not there. Okay. After you have your codebook, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail in the next slide, what you need to do is you need to have more than one coder and go through all the sample that you have selected and code following the codebook every message in the sample that you have selected. In our case, if you have two people and you're going to have 9 commercials that you're content analyzing, you're going to have those 2 people go through each one of those 9 commercials, right? And provide their own coding based on the definitions that you have established. Then after that, what you're going to do to check that actually your process is working appropriately is check whether the 2 coders or 3 or 4, whatever you have, are actually coding systematically and similarly. And to do that, we're going to talk about a metric that enables you to check the inter-rater reliability, which is, how reputable this coding process is, given that it's to some degree subjective, because it's going to be a call that a particular person is going to have to make based on the definitions. Okay, and then you're going to present the results of what it is that you find in terms of the topics that you're observing into the different messages, and whether there is some sort of comparison or some sort of trend that it's interesting. Now, like I was saying before, probably the most important step in doing the content analysis is having a very clearly defined codebook. To do that, you need to start by having an idea on what the topics or concepts that you're interested in coding for are. So you need to have a prior idea of what it is that you're looking for. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to find anything anywhere, right? In this case, the coding is going to be given at least initially by some of the concepts that we're going to discuss in the advertising part of chapter 15. Okay, I'm going to tell you more about this when I discuss exercise 6, but you might want to add some more concepts that maybe I haven't thought of. It is also I'm going to leave one of the 3 categories that I expect you guys to code for more open, because it's going to be more unique to the industry that you guys are studying, and given that you guys can choose your own industry, I don't want to bias or dictate that part, so we'll talk more about that later. Okay, so you need to start with concepts. You need to have very clear definition of each of those concepts, okay? And every coder needs to read and understand, actually, memorize to some degree those definitions, or at least have them handy when they are coding, so they can, stop coding, look at the definition, and then go back to make sure that they don't have any ambivalence regarding what needs to be coded and what is what, okay? And then you need to agree on some sort of unit of analysis. You can have a lot of discussion about this, but I want to make it simple. In the case of video, if you choose video as your format for the campaigns that you're going to be studying, I suggest that you use scenes as unit of analysis. So what's going to happen is, as you go through the video of a commercial, there's going to be different scenes that are pretty distinctive, right? And those are the units of analysis that you should be analyzing, and then later aggregate those or add them up, okay, to make sure that you guys are doing this systematically and consistently the same way. If you are analyzing text, for example, because you're doing a print and it has print advertising, you might want to choose as your unit of analysis a sentence. You could also do paragraph, right? If there is a lot of text, though, that might be unusual in some print commercials, but it might not be in others, right? Depends what it is that you're studying. But in my experience, sentence is a good unit. Analyzing text is a little bit more tedious than analyzing video, but I think it tends to be more objective too. So it's kind of a trade-off, okay? Then after that, your job as a coder is simple. It's just to count the number of times, and write it down, of course, count the number of times that a given concept is actually expressed either explicitly or implicitly, and this is where it gets tricky because there is a little bit of subjectivity involved here, in the particular unit of analysis that you are studying. So in that sentence, do you find that particular concept, yes or no, right? And if so, does it show more than one time? If it does, you just put in the frequency. If it shows up 2 times, you give it a number 2. If it shows up 1 time, you put it 1. And if it doesn't show up at all, you just give it a 0 and move on, right? And then what you're going to do, you're going to have a little, tally that you're going to keep, right? And then what you're going to do is, for the particular unit of analysis, in this case the message, you're going to add all those subunits into the overarching concept score for that particular message, right? So if you have 3 scenes within one ad, you're gonna add the tallies for each of those 3 scenes, and that's gonna be your message score for that particular concept. Same thing if you have 2 paragraphs within an ad, right? Because it's a print ad, then you will add the score for those 2 paragraphs and move on. Okay. So let me give you an example so that you can actually see. So imagine that you're just coding for what kind of appeal the advertising that you're coding has. Okay. And imagine that within the ad there are 3 scenes, right? So in one scene, maybe there is a couple with a kid at their home, and then they go from there to go to their car. So that's scene number 2, and then scene number 3, they are seen driving with the car, you know, in a pretty scenario, right? So those will be scene 1, 2, and 3 within that sketch of an advertising, right? And so you're gonna code each of those scenes differently to make sure that, you know, you're doing this systematically. So you'll take scene 1 and you will see, is there humor appeal in that? And let's say that in that commercial, you know, they're doing something funny. So you just give it a 1 if, you know, you identified some image or some sound or something that makes it, as per your understanding what humor appeal means in advertising, consistent with that. Okay, is there fear appeal? Maybe there is not. Is there sex appeal? I don't know, maybe the gentleman in the ad is wearing a tank top and it's kind of, you know, let's just say showing some skin. So maybe there is some sex appeal involved in there. You score it as 1, right? Maybe in the second scene there are a couple of jokes thrown or something that happens that it's funny in 2 instances within that scene. So because of that, you give it a rating of 2 because there were 2 instances within that scene where humor was actually used to convey the message, and there was no fear appeal in this case, and there was no sex appeal in this case. Okay, and for number 3, scene number 3, let's say that, you know, none of the 3 actually showed up in scene number 3 because the 3 of them are just seen in a car in a pretty scenery, but there is no humor, there is no fear, and there is no sex appeal. Okay, in that situation, what you're doing is each of the coders, let's say that this is the first coder, will look at the ad, will break it down into the scenes, and for each of them will actually compute these scores based on their subjective understanding of what humor appeal is, and then just looking at the video and making a call how many times humor appeal is used within those scenes. Okay, now the totals that I'm computed at the bottom is basically, which you have over here, and those totals are obviously just the scores for these 3 concepts, humor appeal, fear appeal, and sex appeal, that according to coder 1 are in the first advertising. So you have to do this for each of the ads. Also notice that in this simple example, I'm only coding for 3 concepts, but in reality, you're gonna have more than 3 that you need to be coding probably simultaneously. Okay. Now here you have the same example, coder 2. Notice that the table is a little bit different because coder 2 might agree or disagree with coder 1, and this is not a matter of disagreeing. You're just gonna code it based on your understanding of the definition in what's happening in this case video, or in the print image, or if you are doing Twitter, what it says on the Twitter in terms of text, right? So notice that what we're doing is we're checking whether it's consistent or not. And if you look at the total overall, you're going to see that it's consistent in some areas, but not others. And we're going to check this in a minute by looking at the interrated reliability. So what is interrated reliability? It's essentially a measure of how repeatable this measuring concepts via CAS, or content analysis. So we're just checking what happens if you do this over and over again. Will you come up with essentially the same numbers, or will you come up with very different numbers? If you come up with different numbers every time you do it, it's a bad thing. That means that this is not reliable, hence should not be trusted, right? So we're going to check whether actually there is some sort of basic reliability to this process. And let me show you with an example instead of just telling you the formula, which is a little bit confusing, even though it's really easy. right? And so let's do an example. I'm following up with the same example that we did before. So we have two coders, right? Coder 1 and coder 2, and we have three concepts only here that we're coding for, which is humor appeal, sphere appeal, and sex appeal of the advertising that we're studying. Now notice that these are the same scores that we had before. The only thing is I've flipped them here, and now I have the coders on the columns and the concepts on the rows, okay? But it's the same numbers. You can check that by going back in your presentation if you want. Now notice that there is not always agreement, and the way we refer agreement here is simple. You just compare, across the two coders whether the number is the same or not. If it's the same, you say yes, we agree, so you put it a 1. And if it's not the same, like in this case, for example, where one says 1 and one says 2, then we're going to say we don't agree, right? And all we're going to do is we just add here the total number of agreements that we have. In this case, we have 2 agreements and 1 disagreement, right? So the IRR coefficient is essentially the total number of agreements, which is 2 in this case, divided over the total number of coded items, which in this case we coded 3 concepts for 1 advertising, right? So the total number of concepts is just these 3 potentially things that could have gone wrong, right? Let me erase things here so that you can see. So the total number of things we've coded at this point is essentially 3, right? These 3. So 2 divided by 3, right? That 3 is the total number of items that we have coded. Okay, and that's a 66% interrelated reliability score or agreement score. And this is a basic baseline so that you can make sure that whatever coding you're doing actually is repeatable across different people that look at the same material with the same definitions. Now then what you're going to do is after you have your content analysis conducted, right, you're going to present the results. And so you're going to be discussing what it is that you have found in terms of what concepts or topics show up in the different messages that you've studied. Especially it's interesting to compare across different units of analysis. For example, in our case, because you're going to be comparing multiple brands, right? It's interesting to see how the different brands are actually different in terms of the content that you're finding in our case, advertising. So it could be in a book or it could be in any other messages, right? And then sometimes it's useful to provide some examples when you're providing insights that give a little bit more texture and more validity to your claims about why you're claiming that this or that is happening, right? So it's about comparing these different entities that you're going to come up with some interesting insights of. So let me tell you about exercise 6, which is what we're doing content analysis for. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be studying the advertising that some brands are doing, and you're going to pick the brands, right? So start by selecting a brand, the one that you're going to be studying, okay? You pick whichever brand you want. I don't care, it doesn't matter, okay? And then after that, pick a brand. You're going to be picking also their top 2 competitors. The reason why is because we want to have some reference about what's happening in that industry instead of just that brand. So pick a brand and pick 2 competitors. So you should have 3 brands at this point. And those are the 3 brands that you're going to be studying, okay? Now for each of those 3 brands, for each, you're going to pick 3 ads, right? 3 ads. Which 3? I don't care, it doesn't matter. 3 that you want. However, they need to be from the last 3 years. So let's put on at least some frame, right? Time frame that it's similar for all 3 of them. Let's say, 2017 or newer, okay? Just to make sure that context hasn't changed dramatically in all cases, okay? And I don't care, it's okay either way, whether you pick video, print, or text, right? If you wanna use something like Twitter, that's okay with me too, okay? So pick whatever type of message that you want that has 3 commercials for each of these 3 brands. So in total, you're going to be studying 9 ads, 9 advertising messages, okay, of whatever form or format you have chosen, okay. Now, what you need to do is you need to content analyze these ads, okay? And when you're creating your concepts, I want you to at least study 3 different types of concepts. Number 1 is, what is the objective of the advertising, okay? And this comes from chapter 15, where we talk about informative, persuasive, and reminder advertising. So which one of these 3 objectives is more clearly presented within these different ads that you're actually studying, okay? And which brands are appealing more to one or the other of the objectives? What are they really focusing on, so that we can understand? Number 1. Number 2, what kind of appeal are they using, right? There are different types of appeals that we also talked about in chapter 15, okay? So within that, which appeals are showing here? I already discussed 3 of the appeals, 3 of the more typical appeals in advertising. Which ones of those are more used by the different brands? Maybe there's a uniformity, maybe there are big differences. We'll see, right? And then finally, and this is what I'm going to leave more open-ended for you guys, okay? Because this is more industry related or more industry specific. What are the benefits that are being touted, or that are being expressed more often in these ads, right? What kind of benefits are there? Is it about performance? Is it about luxury? Is it about reliability? Is it about flavor? I don't know, right? It's going to be unique to the industry, right? But what kind of benefits are actually discussed or expressed or shown in these campaigns that you're studying, in these advertisings, right? That's the type of concepts that you need to code, at least these 3 types. Okay, notice that each of these 3 types have multiple concepts each. So because of that, you're going to be tracking a decent amount of concepts. I'll say anywhere between 10 and probably 30. I don't think you need to go to 30 for anything, but if you want to be very thorough, you might have to push it down past maybe 15, 16 of them, okay? So you're going to be looking at least, I would say, 10 concepts that you're tracking. 3 that are objective based, I'll say 3, 4, 5 that are appeal based, and then maybe the same number for benefits, okay? So if you add it all up, that gives you about, say 10, 15 concepts you're going to be studying, and you're going to be looking for in these commercials, okay? Now, after you have created your code book with those 10 or 15 concepts that I was mentioning, and you need to write a definition for each of them to make sure everybody's on the same page, okay? Then you need to select 2, at least 2, and I'll say 2 is fine. But if you want to do 3 is okay too. 2 raters or 2 coders within your group that are going to review these 9 commercials, and for each of the 9 commercials, it's going to code these concepts that you have created in your code book, okay? To see how prevalent these concepts are within those 9 commercials, okay? And of course, you're going to aggregate later those up to the brand, because you want to see how the brand is operating. Are they using some of these concepts more than others, right? Okay. You're using 2 raters to make sure that this is repeatable, and the way you're going to check that is by computing your own IRR, the way that I just shown you in a couple of slides back, right? Just compute how many times the coders had an agreement divided over the total number of judgment calls that they made based on the concepts and the number of commercials you have, right? And then finally, what you're going to do is you're going to provide some conclusions for your contest analysis. And to do that, what I strongly suggest is that you basically compare these 3 different brands in terms of, what kind of objective they have for their commercials or their advertising, what kind of appeals do they use, are they different or not, and what kind of benefits do they mention most often, right? So compare those brands and tell me what can you learn from this exercise. Okay. And then to finalize, if you use any resources, you include citations, and if you don't include any other citations for resources, at least cite the ads. Where can I find those advertisings that you are actually using so that I can take a look at them? and this is what you need to complete by this Friday, right? I'll have the details of exactly the same information that you have here, plus due dates on Canvas app at the time you actually see this video.